we're gonna learn how to make a solid growth medium called PDA, which means potato dextrose agar. If you were wondering what a growth medium is, basically it's a medium where the mycelium can grow healthy and strong, while also obtaining certain nutrients, which in this case we will provide through a potato broth and also through sugar, which is dextrose in its various forms. In this case, we're going to do specifically a solid growth medium. Agar acts as a solidifying agent, creating a gel-like substance, providing a suitable environment for the mycelium to grow. To make this solid growth medium, we will need potatoes, agar, and some dextrose, which can come in the form of syrup, but in my case, I'm using honey. Additionally, we will need micropore tape and a recipient that we will discuss later. It's important to note that you won't always need to prepare a whole liter of PDA. If I need to prepare only 10 petri dishes, I will simply prepare a quarter of the recipe, depending on the amount of PDA I need at the time and the amount of mycelium I need to replicate and clone. So keep in mind that you don't always have to make a whole liter. In this case, I'm only going to make half a liter of water. So I will boil half the potatoes, just 500 milliliters of water. It's crucial to boil the potatoes unpeeled and make sure they are thoroughly washed beforehand. I typically wash them multiple times to remove any dirt effectively, leaving them super clean for boiling. Now we will cut the potatoes into small pieces and boil them for 40 minutes. I am currently boiling half a liter of water with 1 potato in a pot to prepare half a liter of PDA. The heat is set low, between medium and low, as our goal is to extract potatoes' properties. Additionally, it's recommended, which I always do, to cover the pot to prevent our broth from evaporating. So, here we have all the necessary components to assemble our solid PDA growth medium. We have pure bee honey that serves as a dextrose source, micropore tape, agar, and these are the containers I was referring to. There are 2 types of containers we can use. I'll explain the first one, petri dishes, which are this. In this case, I'm using a plastic petri dish. Glass petri dishes are also available and they are reusable. What about petri dishes? Firstly, they are much more expensive. They cost significantly more than the plastic containers. And using petri dishes also carries a higher risk of contamination. This is because we have to open the container twice. I'll explain why. Once we have prepared our culture medium, we need to sterilize it. But when using these plastic containers, we can pour our PDA medium directly into them and then sterilize the whole unit. This is because the plastic of these containers can stand high temperatures. So we can assemble our plates, which we will see how to do in a moment, cover them and take them to be sterilized. During sterilization, we are directly sterilizing both the container and the PDA growth medium inside it. Since this plastic can stand high temperatures, everything gets sterilized, and when we open the container, it's ready to receive our mycelium. With this method, there's only one chance or risk of contamination. In contrast, the advantage of petri dishes is that they come already sterilized. However, we have to open them twice. First, once we have prepared our PDA, we need to sterilize it in a glass container such as a jar. It could be a jam jar, and make sure the jar has a lid. We can also use an aluminum foil lid sealed tightly with double-sided tape or a rubber band. Once the PDA is sterilized, we open the petri dishes and insert some of the PDA. Then we have to wait for it to cool down, and then it's ready to use. So, whether you use petri dishes or plastic container, either is fine. It's up to you to decide what you prefer. If you're using these plastic containers, we will need to make a small hole in the center of the lid to function as a gas exchange port. This is crucial because mycelium, being a living fungus, needs to breathe. Without a gas exchange port, the mycelium won't be able to breathe effectively. Creating a gas exchange port essentially involves making a hole. I typically use a knife, inserting it from top to bottom and then from bottom to top to create the hole. And then remove the excess of plastic. There you have it. There you have it. Approximately 1 or 2 centimeters in diameter. Now we will cover it with some micropore tape since it cannot remain open. And there you have it. It needs to be covered to prevent contamination. However, the tape should allow for gas exchange. Once the 40 minutes has passed, we will strain our potato to obtain our potato broth. It's crucial to use a strainer to effectively strain the potato broth from the potatoes. We need to make sure that our potato broth doesn't contain any potato residue. Even though I used a lid to cover the pot, some water will evaporate. I end up using 250 milliliters of the remaining potato broth. Now, while our broth is still hot, we will prepare our PDA. This involves adding agar and honey. We will start by adding half a tablespoon of honey. And mix it. The heat of the broth helps to dissolve the honey and the agar to create a homogeneous mixture. And now we're gonna add a whole tablespoon of agar and mix it well. Make sure it's well mixed. Now we assemble our PDA growth mediums. It's important to note that these recipients or containers are made of polypropylene, a heat-resistant plastic. When you buy the containers, make sure they have the PP mark, usually is in the bottom of the containers. This indicates that they are made of polypropylene plastic. Using another type of plastic could lead into melting during sterilization. Always mix well after adding the PDA to the dishes because it tends to set at the bottom of the jar. As the amount of PDA, avoid using too much. The more agar you add, the more it will take it to solidify. I usually add an amount that is bright to my eye. The amount is important because if the layer is too thin, the mycelium may quickly consume all the PDA, starve or dehydrate. This process is somehow subjective. Some people use a scale and measures everything meticulously, while others do it more by eye. I started using a scale, but after seeing that it worked well, I started doing it more by eye. Just be sure to pay attention to the amount of agar. If you use 2 little agar-agar in 1 liter of water, it might not solidify properly. The most important aspect of this solid growth medium is that it's solid, like a gel. So, once we have our containers filled with PDA, then stick on micropore tape to cover the holes. Next, we will sterilize our containers in our pressure cooker or autoclave. In my case, since I'm working at home, I use a pressure cooker because it's cheaper than autoclave. And what if I want to sterilize something in petri dishes instead? In that case, you will need to transfer the PDA mixture from the current container to a glass jar or another container that is airtight, and then sterilize it in the same way that we did with this ones. The procedure is the same, except that you won't be adding the PDA mixture directly into the petri dish. Instead, you will sterilize the PDA first and then add it to the already sterilized container, the petri dish. So, if you use the petri dishes, you will need first, you have your PDA mixture and you won't add it directly into your PDA plates or dishes. You will add it to a glass jar and then you will sterilize it just like these ones with a pressure cooker or an autoclave. You will only sterilize the PDA mixture because petri dishes come already sterilized. The only thing you're sterilizing with petri dishes is the PDA itself, unlike the plastic containers, the polypropylene containers that wasn't sterilized and neither was the PDA. So when you sterilize the polypropylene containers with the PDA inside them, you will sterilize in the pressure cooker or the autoclave the whole unit, the whole thing. To avoid opening it twice, it's more convenient to sterilize both the container with the PDA inside. So it's more convenient to sterilize everything together. Another important thing to note is that the petri dishes doesn't need gas exchange port, so you won't need to make any holes. So what do we have here? We have a Tramontina brand pressure cooker, which is excellent. I bought it online. This cooker is 6 liters, not very big, so we probably need to make many sterilizations. In my case, I don't have a stand to keep the containers separated from the water. If the containers touch the water, the lid can open, ruining sterilization. So I use glass jam jars as supports. We will place a cloth, a towel, or a piece of fabric inside to isolate the metal of the cooker from the glass jars or the containers we want to sterilize. When we place the cloth, we will start inserting the jars that will hold our containers. And now we're going to place the containers on top of the jars. We need to arrange them so they can fit into the cooker. We probably are going to be able to sterilize 3 containers at a time. You can also get a metal stand that can fit the diameter of your cooker, or have one made with legs like a trivet or a rack to directly isolate the containers. Since the containers are small and they have lids, when the pressure cooker comes to high temperatures, they could open. The water starts dispersed everywhere and we don't want our containers to get ruined and have to discard them. If you're using a metal rack, a trivet, or something similar, it's important to place the cloth underneath. You can also use smaller jars to fit more containers and reduce the amount of sterilizations. Okay, since we have our jars and our containers arranged, we will add about 2 liters of water. If the jars start to float because of the water we added, we will need to fill them with some water too, so they don't float. Another important thing to make sure is that the water reaches more than half of the jars. So here is our cooker with our 3 containers. Now we close our cooker, and once is closed, we will put it on medium heat until steam starts coming out of the valve. Once steam starts coming out, we will sterilize for 60 minutes. Once the steam starts coming out, we will lower the heat to minimum.